science opportunities. Actually, med schools encourage people to try basic sciences because it takes a lot of work to be a basic scientist. At the end of it, you'll be a clinician investigator, clinician scientist. And we need more of those types of people to help to fuel the clinical research that we do. But there's as equal emphasis on doing clinical research and growing emphasis on quality improvement. I would say in the past, quality improvement research has kind of been at the lower end of the totem pole because the methods were not as defined, but now we have more definitions of how to actually provide good quality improvement research and publish, and so it's becoming more respected. The other type of research that I didn't include in here is medical education research and like implementation science research, and that's something else that's being looked at more favorably now because the medical world is realizing that, we have a bunch of adults that we're educating, and we need to make sure that we're educating them properly, and that means that we need to try different types of education schemes with them, and then we need to share all of these different education schemes with other people so that we can all do things a little bit more routinely for higher education purposes. And so there is more emphasis and value being placed on education and implementation science research, which is pretty cool. And then the other cool thing that's happening is use of social media and other types of technology in healthcare. That's picking up as well as a newer type of research that can really change how we view clinical research, which is exciting for me because I'm in social media. Okay, so how do you do the research? First things first, you need a mentor. So what are your thoughts on good mentors? Anybody has any ideas? Somebody said something, I didn't hear it.
Patience.
Patience, yes. Definitely you want somebody who is patient.
Somebody that's relatable.
Relatable, good.
Strong background.
Strong background in
Like the human thoughts.
in your field, yes.
Hold you accountable.
Hold you accountable, I like that, yes.
Somebody you can trust.
Somebody that you can trust. Why do you need to trust them?
Because I mean, if they're not putting you in the wrong direction, then what was the point of them being your mentor? You know what I'm saying? You want somebody who's gonna put you in the right direction, the right position.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're new to this game, you want to get your best foot forward. You need somebody that you don't know anything about it. You need somebody who's going to take you and move you in that right direction. Okay? You need somebody who is not only going to push, but you need somebody who's going to pull you along as well, right? That's really important. A mentor, I still don't know why I have this one picture there. I was sharing it with the other group and I thought this was the coach, but the coach one is actually somewhere else. This is the coach one. I have no idea why I have this one. Goalie, I'm not sure. So the mentor is the coach. They're also your teacher, right? You want somebody that can help you to learn the stuff, not just say, I have this paper that I wrote, I don't have time to submit it, you submit it and I'll put your name on it. It gets you a publication, that's great, but you don't know anything about writing, right? And so when that person goes away, then you have no idea, but maybe people will have expectations of you because you did something, but you didn't really do it because you didn't learn it. So you need that teacher. And there's that pull mentality that I was telling you about. You need somebody to be able to lift you up and say, okay, come on, let's go. A cheerleader. Sometimes you don't get what you want. You don't get funded, you don't get that paper published, you don't get the presentation accepted, and you still need that person to be like, hey, it's okay, let's keep moving on. I got this other idea, let's move on with this, you can do this. And that's really important. It sounds really corny, but a good mentor knows when their mentee needs just that, okay? And then somebody that respects you, right? Somebody that is not going to take you for granted, somebody who is not using you just to get ahead, and then you won't actually have any benefit from this. A mentorship relationship is two ways, okay? It's never a one-way street. You need somebody who is a deep thinker, that's gonna be actively and continuously thinking about what's the next opportunity that they can get for you. It's not just about them. They're thinking, okay, well, if I take this project on, am I gonna be able to get her to help me on this project? Okay, that's what you want from a mentor. This is a slide that shows the difference between a sponsor and a mentor. So we talked about what the mentor does for you. There are a couple other things there that a sponsor does that is different, okay? The sponsor is the one who will stick their neck out for you, sometimes to their own detriment. They're taking a risk on you. They're saying, look, I'm putting my faith in you, and I'm putting my name out there and supporting you and saying that you are the person for this job. If you screw up, I look bad. Don't screw up, right? It gives you as the mentee or the sponsored individual a lot of pressure because you don't want to disappoint that person, right? But the balance that it maintains in a relationship is such that this person could be solely responsible for you moving from point A to point X. It's not just about A to B anymore, right? And so you want to make sure that you can find and identify an individual who will help you with that. Somebody who may have a similar interest in you and who has connections that will be able to not use the connections by just merely name dropping, but by actually putting you in those positions and giving you a seat at the table, right? A lot of us in this room need sponsors. Mentors are good too, but we need sponsors, right? And
How do you find your mentor?
so somebody asked me that before. So I have a non-traditional way of finding a mentor. I went into residency, and I just said, oh, well, I'm interested in infectious disease. I talked to my program director, help me find a mentor. So they found a random person, and I was like, okay, sure. I went and I did a couple of things with that person and realized that I had zero interest clinically in the stuff that we were doing. It was great to have a couple publications, but I didn't want to do this anymore. And that person was not as thrilled with me saying that, but eventually we parted ways, and I began searching for somebody who had interests like myself. So I'm interested in skin and soft tissue infections, like skin infections. So looking for somebody at my institution who had those interests. And there was one person who was interested in that. And when I talked to him, he was as passionate about it as I was. And so I said, well, I really, really want to work with this person. You know, I thought I was picking the right mentor. And I realize now that I was very focused on just the medicine aspect of it and less focused on the growth aspect. And so now I have found myself in a circle of mentors, which I think works much better because I have somebody who is a mid-career academic physician who is outside of my specialty that helps me to make decisions on should I accept this position, should I accept this paper, should I do this, is this going to be helpful for me in the long run? I have a early career physician who is sort of in the same area as myself, but a little bit more connected with people within my specialty who has been helping me to find opportunities. And I have a later career physician who is helping me to just get the opportunities. And then what I found is with those different mentors in my circle, I've become more confident in now seeking out opportunities myself. So nowadays, If there's something I want to do, I email somebody and be like, hey, you know what? I really think you should have a conference on social media in healthcare, and I think you should also have a conference in diversity in medicine. And I'll be willing to do it. And then I get the opportunity, right? So that's kind of, it takes you from a step where you're not sure of yourself. When you surround yourself with people like that, then you can move on to being a little bit more sure and finding those opportunities and making them for yourself. Okay. So now you've decided that you have a study, you want to perform this study based on whatever your idea is. You need to decide on if that's actually worth it, and how you decide if it's worth the trouble. Thinking about all these W's. Okay, who is this project going to affect? Who do I also need around me to be successful with this project? Where is this going to occur? Is this something that is going to happen here at my institution? Am I going to go out into the community and get somebody to help me out with this project? When is this going to happen? Is it happening now in undergrad? Am I thinking to the future? How am I going to do it? What are the tools that I need to try to be successful with this project? And so as you're working through these W's, this is where your mentorship circle is helpful, because you bounce questions off of them, you bounce ideas off of them, and then they can help you to find the ways that you can be most successful. Especially at this stage in your careers, you want to be able to trust somebody to give you that advice on where the next step is, okay? So it's all around teamwork. If you notice that this, the mentorship circle, all these revolve around being a part of a team. So who's in your team? You have your clinician investigator. So at this stage in your careers, it would be whoever you link up with to do that project with, right? So for all of my projects, I'm the clinician investigator. I have a couple of medical students and residents working with me on projects. I'm the one in charge. But when I was a trainee, it was somebody else who was doing that, okay? Then you have your study coordinator. So depending on the type of study you do, you might need some extra help to get all the moving pieces together, okay? If you're doing a clinical trial, you need to know how to enroll the patients, where are we gonna get the study drug from, where are we gonna do the procedures. All these things need to be coordinated, and it's always better to have somebody external of you doing that. And then, my buddies, the minions. Now I love this particular picture, because for me, being successful in clinical research is a journey from being the minion to being the clinician investigator, right? So this is how I started my journey as a minion. I wanted to be involved in something, anything, put me on your project, right? I'll work really hard, I promise. And so I did, and I learned the process, right? That's what it means. You learn that process, and then you move on to the next stage where you can start to think about what your question is going to be and create your own study plan yourself. You'll still need help, right? You're still not the investigator, but you're getting closer. By the time you put in a few years of that work into it, you get to a point where not only can you conceive the idea yourself, not only can you think about all of the issues that need to be addressed before the project needs to occur, you can start thinking, who do I delegate stuff to now, right? Okay, now it's time for me to get some minions, right? And then the process continues. And for me, the greatest, the greatest part of this journey has been learning it enough to be able to teach it to somebody else. I'm a teacher. I mean, I love that stuff. And so if you're sitting here and you're thinking, well, I don't really know anything about research, it's okay, right? Because eventually, so if you link yourself up with the right person at your institution, eventually you will learn it. And when you learn it to the point where you can teach it to to somebody else, that's when you know that you've made it. The other person that's in the team is a statistician because, I mean, who wants to do all the stats themselves, right? We have people who go to undergrad and they do biostats degrees, and then they do graduate school and they do biostats degrees, and that's all they want to do. So we love to have biostatisticians on our teams. We have masters and PhD statisticians on our teams doing our work for us. Okay, so you're doing some clinical research. It involves humans. Before you decide to start the project, after you've said, okay, this is my proposal, this is what I want to do, before you can touch a human being or touch their medical record, you need to get permission from the IRB. So the IRB is the Institutional Review Board, and that is a committee that is in every single institution, every single hospital. So all of your undergrad, if you're associated with a medical school, they will have one. If there's any sort of medical research that is occurring at your hospital, they have an IRB. And so they are the ones that are responsible for ensuring that you do not hurt people when you do your projects, right? We need these kind of oversight. Because before we have this type of oversight, a lot of bad things happen in medical research, okay? That's another topic. For animals, we have an institutional review board for them as well. It's called ICOOC. And so also we want to make sure that animals are treated fairly and ethically as well, okay? So before embarking on these types of projects, you have to get permission from these people. We already talked about the statistician. And so you've got your statistics, you got your results, and now it's time for you to write your paper, right? And so you're just like, punching away, trying to write the paper. Does anybody know how to use a typewriter? Okay. All right, so moving on from your writing your paper to go from the guy that's stressed out to the kids that are happy takes a lot of work. And so working through trying to figure out who the authors are going to be is important, but it's not as important as this slide. This is the slide that tells you how to actually outline your paper. And this is the same for any type of paper you write, okay? The abstract is the most important part of your paper. The abstract is a very short summary of the entirety of your research. Usually about 50 to 100 words, and it's very, very difficult to write a good abstract. Even though it's listed first, you should write the abstract last. You should write the abstract after you've written your entire paper and you're able to distill your paper down into these points that are very, very salient, that are very short, that are powerful, okay? That's what the abstract has to be. And the reason why it's so important is because even though you write it last, it is presented first. And that means it is the first thing that anybody is going to read when they're considering your paper. If they don't like your abstract, they're not going to read your paper, right? So, you okay back there? Okay, if they don't like your abstract, they're not going to read your paper, right? And so you want to make sure that that abstract is pristine. As you go through this process of writing your paper, the most important thing is for you to get that mentor and perhaps multiple people to review that paper, right? You want them to take that red pen and destroy your paper, because it is in that destruction that you will find a brand new paper that is more meaningful. Never submit your first draft. It will be rejected. Because there will be mistakes that you haven't seen, there will be mistakes that others who have looked at it haven't seen, and there's always room for improvement, okay? Always revise. So your literature search, you already had a little talk with Terry about that, so I'm not going to go into that with you guys. After you finish your literature search and you put your paper together, you want to submit it. So how do you decide who to submit it to? There are credible journals and then there are predatory journals. The credible journals will say, hey, you want to submit your journal? Sure, there's an application process, we'll review it, we'll probably reject it, but we'll let you know. The predatory journal will say, oh my God, you have research, go publish it, bring it. Doesn't matter what it says. And people have actually studied this. Somebody wrote a paper about turning paint from blue to green. It was completely bogus, and they published it in one of these journals. And you know, it's one of these things where you have to kind of be careful where you send your work. But there are great places that you can publish, and so you can ask your mentor whether or not this would be a good place to publish your research. Okay? Another good tip is to look where you've received your references, wherever they've published. Look in those places as a place that you can publish your work. Yeah.
Would it be better to publish your work in a credible journal as in a predatory journal?
You don't want to publish in a predatory journal because nobody will read it. That's just the truth. They cost money as well, but the most important thing is nobody will read it. And the whole point of you doing this work is to share it with others, right? People need to read it in order for it to make any difference. Yeah. Oh, I don't, off the top of my head, I don't think I'm supposed to say names, but you'll know because they'll send you an email and it will say, "Greetings, Miss blah, 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 blah. Your eminence in this particular topic that you have nothing to do with is wonderful, and we read all of your papers that you never published, and we want you to give us your paper on blah, 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 blah." And that's kind of how you know it's a predatory journal. Yeah.
Is there an application process for predatory journals as well?
Usually they email you, and then they tell you to email them back. And then you go through all of this work, and then it's for nothing. Is there a question back there?
Yeah, for credible journals, how long does that application process like sometimes take?
Can take months. One journal, I had a paper in there for about 6 months. And I actually forgot about it. And then I got an email saying, "Oh, hey, it's been accepted." I was like, "Oh, wow, okay, cool." Because it just takes so long. If they're gonna reject you though, they'll reject you like that. So you don't have to worry about that. Okay, so you got through, you sent it into a credible journal, and it looks like they're gonna publish you. They did. Now how do you disseminate your work? There's lots of good ways to disseminate your work. Your paper is gonna be published, so sometimes it's gonna be a hard copy. Then you'll send you an email copy that you can send off to people by email. But then what's really cool is social media. And so journals are publishing stuff on social media now, and that's how they're increasing viewership, right? And so when I say you don't want your stuff to be in a predatory journal because nobody reads it, it's because of this. Because you send your thing to New England Journal of Medicine, and New England Journal of Medicine posts it on Twitter, a lot of people are going to be reading it. The predatory journals, all they care about is your money, and that's it. So yes. In those predatory journals, oh yeah. The credible journals, sometimes they will charge a page fee. It's not as outlandish as the predatory ones. It can get expensive though. Yeah. So I'm gonna stop it there. I'm free to I don't have a lot of time, right? So I'm gonna stop. This is where I ended up stopping for the other group as well. But I'm happy to answer questions that you guys have about what I've talked about and my personal journey through research. I started out with nothing, and I had this one slide that I showed them that this was my first experience with research as a 5th grader back in the Caribbean. And even back then I knew I was going into infectious disease. Apparently I did something about mosquitoes. But in undergrad I did 2 literature reviews, one for my biochemistry class and one for my microbiology class. And neither of them were published because they were just for classes. And then in medical school I did a research project that was really elaborate and nobody cared about it, and it was never published. I never tried to publish it. It was just for a med school class. And so when I was applying for residency, this is how I felt about my research section. And I thought that I was never going to get a chance because I didn't have a lot of research. And the whole point of this slide is that even if you may not have a lot at this point, I'm not sure what stage you guys are at in your undergrad, but even if you may not have a lot of research at this point as you're trying to move on to that next step, there will be opportunities that come afterwards. I was very successful during residency and fellowship, yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of like talking about this dilemma earlier, like with some of my friends, like a lot of like researchers, they want people that have like research experience, but especially like when you're an undergrad, you don't have research experience, so how are you supposed to, like, how do you go about it?
I hate that. It's the no job without experience can't get the experience because you can't get a job conundrum. For me personally, as now that I'm an investigator, I don't have that philosophy. I love teaching. So you have no experience, I'll take you, let's do it. I'll show you how to do it if you're willing to learn. But it is a real thing, especially in basic science research, because they want to know that you know how to pipette and you know how to work with the stuff, but everybody's teachable, right? So I would say if you're interested in a particular topic, and one researcher in that area says, oh, well, you don't have experience, try to find somebody else, right? Don't give up on that particular area, because there are people out there who are willing to teach, right? And all that it takes is somebody who's willing to have that, who said patience? Somebody said patience? Yeah, that's where the patience is needed, right? Because if I have to teach you, then I can't expect that you know it, right? And then you also have to be patient too, because if you don't know it, you can't expect to know it, right? And so it's a dynamic, but yeah, it's something that I was really frustrated about, and part of the reason why I personally didn't get involved in any research, because I didn't have any experience in research and I didn't know who to turn to.